Welcome back. House Speaker Mike Johnson admitting there could be another delay for the House reconciliation bill in an effort to firm up all of the details that are going to go into it. Johnson wants to combine all of the president's top wishes into one massive bill, while also finding cuts to offset things like the Trump tax cuts, border security. A group of more than 10 New York Democrats, led by Jerry Nadler, have sent a letter urging Speaker Johnson to include a repeal of the state and local tax deduction in any bill. They say that the SALT Deductibility Act has strong bipartisan support, and they're offering to work with Republicans to pass it. Joining me now is Maryland Congressman and Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. So what do you make of this new push now to increase the SALT deduction?
Well, it's definitely going to be part of the negotiation on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extension, no question about it. But, Maria, the other thing that's in there is actually adjustment to the AMT. And obviously, one has to go in hand with the other. So, again, this is going to be subject to a negotiation because if we remove the SALT tax, a lot of those people are going to be subject to AMT. So, again, this is a balancing act. The members of the Freedom Caucus agree that we need to do something to reform SALT, but it's unclear that just removing the caps entirely is either fiscally responsible or possible.
Yeah, it's a great point, especially since you have so many others who are also having a voice in this discussion who want to cut spending. I mean, let's face it. You got net interest cost of $881 billion in fiscal year 24. Interest on the debt is the single largest item in the budget behind Social Security, more than spending on defense, Medicare, and children. So how are you going to work on all of this together when you've got serious costs in terms of defense, $125 billion there, in terms of the border, $150 billion at a minimum there, and then you've got all these new tax cuts that President Trump has introduced into the conversation, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and now you're talking about lifting the SALT deduction?
Well, you're right, Maria. The fact is that, we have to send a signal to the financial markets that we're serious on bending the deficit curve. I do believe that there is, as DOGE and Elon Musk are finding out, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of money improperly spent in the U.S. government. There are programs where people who are ineligible, like Medicaid, still collect or still are on those programs. We have to look at every program. The president said, look, Social Security and Medicare benefits off the table. We get it. But we have to look at really every other program to see to it that we can deliver the tax cuts and that we can deliver on deficit reduction.
Yeah, it's a great point that you make because obviously the majority of our spending is mandatory spending. But recently, as I've asked this question of how are you going to come up with offsets, what I keep hearing from your colleagues is that, well, all mandatory spending is not mandatory. It's yes, okay, so 76% of the spending is considered mandatory on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, but are there other programs in that 76% that don't touch those programs?
Well, there are. Look, we think that there should be work requirements for able-bodied people who choose not to work. We don't think they should be on Medicaid. We don't think they should be receiving food stamps. There are ways that, again, we can cut the tremendous increase in what we call the non-Social Security, non-Medicare, non-interest payment part of mandatory spending. There are tremendous opportunities. We've uncovered them. We're going to be talking about them over the next few weeks because we think that's the gold mine that needs to be hit.
So Senate Republicans are going against the House Speaker in terms of his ideas on this one bill. They released their $430 billion plan to fund the president's agenda. And Senate Budget Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham wants two bills. He said that the resolution will increase annual spending by nearly $86 billion, fully offset with the spending cuts. The bill provides money for border security, deportation, but it does not extend Trump's tax cuts. The Senate expected to come out with a tax bill later this year, Congressman. So what about that? Newt Gingrich says if you're going to separate tax cuts out of the other stuff, you better have that done by July 4th. I mean, this is a really, fast calendar. Number one, are you expecting the large reconciliation bill on the president's desk by Memorial Day? And number two, will you be able to follow that up with tax cuts if you do this in two different bills?
Well, Maria, the most important thing is to get the president the monies he needs to control the border and to begin on his defense enhancement, Iron Dome, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's what the Senate does. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. The Freedom Caucus has said, look, we don't care whether it's one or two bills, but it needs to be started now because we need to get the president he needs. So again, whether it's one or two bills, we don't care. I do agree with the speaker. We need to have this done by summer. I think we can do it. But if we go with one big bill, what we're doing is we're seeing the roadblocks in the House. That's the problem.
So in other words, if you go with one big bill, you've got people in the House who are saying, no, 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 I'm not going to sign that. I'm not going to support that because the salt increase is not in there, for example. Or no, 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 I'm not going to support that because you're not cutting enough spending and the offsets are not there.
That's right. Well, those are complicated issues. We will resolve them by summer. The question is, will we resolve them by 2 or 3 weeks from now? And I think we're not going to. So, again, the House needs to decide. Are we going to do something quickly? If not, perhaps the Senate approach is the way to go. So
it sounds to me like you've resigned to the fact that the reality is it's got to be two bills.
Well, again, I was a little disappointed. The House Budget Committee. If we don't move on a bill this week, we are weeks behind schedule, and the president needs money for that border security.
Great point. You're absolutely right. I mean, now you're talking about this week. It better be done this week. Meanwhile, while the president has had an incredible number of wins in the first 3 weeks, he's digging into these tariffs. I want to get your take on this. It's going to impose a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports today. And my sources tell me that tariffs on Europe are very close behind, that he's going to do a reciprocal tariff on Europe, and that will include a VAT tax applied to the tariff because Europe charges us a VAT tax. That's going to be announced later on this week. Here's White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller with me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures. Watch.
The president's making clear that we are going to pursue a policy of reciprocity. In other words, if we're getting charged 30% by Europe, then we need to charge them 30% in return. If they want to be charged less than 30%, they're going to have to lower their barriers so that it's fair and equal and, yes, reciprocal treatment. Here's another area where Europe is engaging in predatory practices. Tech companies are subject to digital taxes, censorship, and onerous financial penalties that are tens of billions of dollars every single year. Obviously, that has to go into the reciprocal treatment as well. You cannot have a situation where our country, our auto companies, our tech companies are just a piggy bank for Europe.
Yep, and now China is already retaliating, sir. Chinese tariffs on about $14 billion worth of U.S. goods take effect today. That range is from 10 to 15%, impacting crude oil, liquefied natural gas, farm machinery, and other products, Congressman. And by the way, you just heard Stephen Miller talk about what Europe does in terms of digital taxes and all this other stuff on our tech companies. China's not far behind because there's a good story in the Journal this morning. Here it is. China's strategy in trade war threaten U.S. tech companies. First line, officials in Beijing building a list of potential targets of antitrust probes, hoping to influence tech executives close to President Trump so he backs off on the tariffs. So we got it coming from all sides, Congressman.
That's absolutely right. And the president has made it clear that, again, there will be reciprocity, just like Miller said. I mean, look, if Europe wants to hide its tariffs under the guise of VAT taxes or, again, going after tech and digital, we have to uncover that. And we have to, again, begin a discussion with Europe about rolling those back.
Yeah. And by the way, we haven't even talked about this USAID, whatever you want to call it. I mean, all this money, $2 million for sex changes, LGBTQ activism in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Europe, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. Wow. Congressman, were you aware of this money that is being paid out from USAID?
We suspected for years that there was basically a RICO deal going on in USAID, that there was gross corruption, there was conspiracy to hide where this money was going. And thank goodness that Elon Musk has found the paper trail for where that money was going. It infuriates many Americans, and they deserve to be infuriated over this.
Yeah, we all are. Congressman, good to see you. We'll be following your work, sir. Thank you.